Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. BetOnline has hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit betonline.ag today and make the game day action count a little bit more. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. He is Justin King. This is National Signing Day for Penn State football, so congratulations to everyone who's a part of the class of 2025 for Penn State football, making their way to Happy Valley in the very near future. So Penn State obviously is hoping to be credibly in contention for a national championship this coming season. A lot of changes that we know about, players off to the NFL, players staying, changes at defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles was formally introduced as the defensive coordinator yesterday to the public. So a lot of stuff going on with Penn State in terms of the football program and the development towards the future. And one thing that popped to mind for Justin and I, now with Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator, is how the defense will change, but especially with Abdul Carter leaving for the NFL draft. Now, a lot of speculation out there with Myles Garrett wanting out of Cleveland. Could Abdul Carter be one of the first 3 to the first pick overall in this NFL draft? His value could go through the roof because of that, the ripple effect. I think the ripple effect for Penn State is, how do you replace Abdul Carter's production? It doesn't feel like there will be one specific person who just flat out replaces Abdul Carter. How could you? And it was so impressive to see his maturation over this past season, switching from linebacker to defensive end, his first time doing that at the Big Ten level, the college football level. So incredibly impressive what he was able to do in one season. But I want to back up here first and talking about what we can expect from this defense. And Jim Knowles speaking with the media yesterday, we understand, some of the friction that he experienced at Ohio State with Larry Johnson Sr., who Penn State fans know very well, was Larry Johnson Sr. loves his 4-man fronts, and Jim Knowles prefers a 3-man front. Now, knowing what you know about the way Penn State, James Franklin, the way they like to put together their defenses, their defensive line, recruiting, personnel decisions, all those sorts of things, do you think this is a big shift, or at least with the existing personnel, hey, going from a 4-man to a 3-man front for Penn State in 2025 might be a good thing, especially considering Carter is off to the NFL?
I mean, it's all about fit, right? Like, just in terms of the players that you bring in and what you're asking them to do from their expectations of development. I think a 4-3 to a 3-4 is a little bit of a difference for a defensive lineman, where you're getting a little bit more girth in the middle and some bigger guys on the outside versus guys playing their different gap responsibilities before. I mean, just a different level of athleticism. I mean, you can make that crossover, but there's some gaps when you talk about just that recruiting and just raw materials that you're working with. But I mean, to replace someone like a top 10 pick is always going to be hard. But Penn State is one of the few programs that has been devoted to development. So I would expect someone to kind of pop out and show their prowess. You didn't think you just find somebody that would go or be as regarded as Micah Parsons once was, 5 years ago. And here we go, got Abdul. So I think understanding just the funnel of development that Penn State is able to produce at that defensive line position, it's safe to expect that someone else is going to pop out eventually.
To your point, you could see a 3-4, you could see a 3-3-5. Jim Knowles likes his three safety looks. He likes his jack position as well, which Penn State kind of refers to as a lion position. We saw how Jalen Reed played that last season. Safety / linebacker, being able to kind of move around a little bit depending on what the defense wants. So there's different options that Jim Knowles is going to be able to play with, but it's obviously moving on from Abdul Carter, who's somebody that theoretically, if Abdul Carter were still with the team in 2025, maybe the best candidate for that jack position. Who knows? It could have been another safety, for instance, could have been a Dom DeLuca, someone that you're transitioning to that spot who's a little bit more nimble, playing a variety of different positions. And I think that's a valid question to ask going into this season with Jalen Reed off to the National Football League. Is there any early front runner in your opinion? It's like, hey, this guy could play that lion position or that jack position, as Jim Knowles refers to it as.
Man, depending on how they use them, you think of somebody like a Rojas, possibly, right? Like, depending if it goes from a linebacker back or like a safety up, it's kind of that hybrid position, depending on, like the different guys that you're dealing with. I mean, yeah, who knows? Like someone like a King Mack that comes back and finds his place in that kind of roaming area. But that's hard to say before like the personnel's solidified and who's coming in tomorrow or who's coming in from signing day.
Yeah, we got about 7 months to figure out how this is all going to get put together. And the good thing for Penn State, once the schedule gets underway in September, it's not really till September 27th that you really got to be kind of buttoned up. You got that home game against Oregon, which feels pretty even, at least on paper, based on what the team should be in 2025. Again, coming back to this defense, if you're going for a three-man front, how does that fundamentally change what Penn State might be looking at in terms of a physical build or a skill set for a defensive end, to the point you were just making? If it's a 4-3 versus a 3-4 or even a 3-3-5, a defensive end in a 4-3 can be a little bit more nimble, a little bit lighter in terms of weight, and be faster and be a speed rusher. Whereas if you're tighter inside the tackles, you might need some guys who are pushing 280 or something like that. And that's where Dennis Sutton, I think, could really thrive in something like this. Not that he wasn't thriving in a 4-3, but feels like Denai is the type of guy who can do whatever you ask him to do. And that's the other aspect of this, is you hope you have Jim Knowles for a little while. You just don't know how much that's, in this age of college football, could change any given moment. So I guess all this is to say, do you think this will alter the way Penn State looks at that defensive end position, considering the three-man front preference?
I think they have to, right? I think you have to get bigger guys just from the standpoint of what you're going to be asking them to do from a responsibility standpoint. So, it may take a little bit, but like you said, they have some guys already in the room that can fill that position. They've been recruiting big defensive linemen for a minute. I'm trying to think of the guys in the past, and I think they can find two that can play those end positions, but it's, again, is that what they've been trained to do? There's a little different responsibilities and working through the kinks of that. But like any good coach, you put guys in a position to be successful. So I think with this coaching staff, we should expect that.
Penn State's defensive end room lists as such. You have Malachi Williams, the freshman out of Philadelphia. I'm sure Jim Knowles is going to love working with his Philly guys. Zariah Fisher is a name that is interesting to me because a lot of people forgot about him, frankly. No disrespect to Zariah, but was out with an injury this past season. And with the eligibility rules, it was like, I thought he was done, but he's not. He's able to come back next season. You saw a lot of the players on the existing team talking about pay attention to Zariah Fisher in 2025. Zariah is a guy who we've seen flashes of in the past. In 2023, it looked like, okay, he's going to be a rotational defensive end. He could get some run. Unfortunately, suffers an injury. From what you've seen of his skill set, is he the type of guy that you think could jump in there and be maybe rotational? I don't know if he's necessarily a starter, but is it still kind of like the jury's out on Zariah Fisher?
I think he can definitely be a rotational guy, right? I think anybody that's a mainstay has to show some level of evidence of impact when they get in there. But I think he has the athleticism, there's pure strength and football prowess to be a rotational guy. But again, like, availability is your best trait a lot of times in college football or just football in general. So staying healthy is a critical piece, especially playing in the trenches.
I think the one thing that's interesting, it's the older guys. Always you're going to lean on that experience. Zariah Fisher is somebody that's going to rotate in there, listed about 6'3", 260. Smith Vilbert, 6'6", 280, and then you have Denai Dennis Sutton, 6'5", pushing 270. If you've got Smith Vilbert and Denai Dennis Sutton as your DNs in a 3-down front, you feel pretty good about that, regardless if it's against the run or the pass. And Smith Vilbert was a guy, again, injury issues. People had forgotten about him. Last year, he rotated in. A lot of people on the staff and within the team, the players were like, pay attention to Smith Vilbert. And Smith Vilbert coming back in 2025 is big for Penn State. Now, again, I don't look at any of these players individually and think, oh, they're going to immediately replace Abdul Carter. Absolutely not. This is going to be a lot of guys working together to attempt to replace that production. But Smith Vilbert, there's a chance he fits in really, really well to a 3-man front in 2025. What do you see about his skill set that you think could be valuable in a Jim Knowles defense?
The skill set that he provides, I think that is clear as his size, right? Size and speed. But I don't know. I think his technical development has been, it's been slowing him down in the sense of his production. So I think his size and athleticism, this is a physics game first, I think, are his best traits.
Mason Robinson is a redshirt freshman DN, 6'3", 250. Jalen Harvey, who got a little bit of playing time last year, was banged up towards the back end of the season, 6'2", 250. Bobby Mears, redshirt freshman, 6'4", 250. Jordan Mayer, redshirt freshman, 6'4", 240. Max Granville is someone you and I and plenty of people have talked about a good amount. 6'3", 230, a true freshman this past season. For those that don't remember, he reclassified from the class of 2025 to the class of 2024. So he was able to be a part of this past 2024 season. And at one point was considered the 3rd down backup to Abdul Carter. Now, I think there's a lot of people that have maybe jumped to the conclusion that Max Granville, boom, he's going to start in 2025. Again, way too early to tell that. But Max Granville getting in there early and working on his body and trying to get himself ready for a Big Ten schedule, I think is at least encouraging for Penn State fans. From what little you saw of Max Granville and what you know about him from within the program, what's your early impression?
I don't really have any strong early impressions, to be completely honest. I haven't seen enough to kind of make any judgments about the kid. But I heard good things about him. Hard worker and showing up to work. Penn State recruits a certain type of kid, so you expect that from the guys that they come in. So I don't really have any initial thoughts until he gets on the field.
Same situation for the transfer from Texas A&M, Anai White. Feels like more of a project. Again, I've seen a lot of people on social media talking about, well, Anai White should be starting day one. Again, I lean more towards that defensive end position that's opposite of Denai Dennis Sutton. You're going to see a rotation of Smith Vilbert and Zariah Fisher, provided they're able to stay healthy, God willing. But Anai White is a guy who's a project, had some success at Texas A&M, but that was years ago and early in his time at Texas A&M in 2022, 2023, 2024, some injuries cropped up, just didn't get a lot of experience. 2023 was out for most of the season. In 2024, he just wasn't factored into a lot of their plans. So raw ability, the chance to be something at Penn State, clearly, but it just feels really, really early with a transfer on top of that in regard to evaluating him and seeing where he's going to be within this defense. So it feels like it's going to be a lot of guys rotating in there to try and replace the production of Abdul Carter. And to the point you were talking about with, hey, Tony Rojas is maybe a guy who could be somebody you would nominate as that lion position, that jack position, as we've talked about. The linebacker spot is going to be interesting going into 2025 as well. As that is like, okay, are you looking at more of the capability for guys to be rush outside linebackers? You've got a bunch of edge rushers that are coming in as part of this National Signing Day class for Penn State. About 1 billion more tight ends that Penn State has gotten as well. But at least on the defensive side of the ball, more edge rushers for Penn State to play with in this incoming freshman class. A lot of linebackers that are going to have to step up, have an opportunity in this type of defense, 3-4, 3-3-5, depending on what Jim Knowles trots out there. Replacing Kobe King, I think, is a big deal, especially if you're going to try and move somebody to be more of a guy who operates in space, operates off the edge. How big of a void is that for you in this defense going into 2025?
I think it's a huge void. Guys like that you take for granted of like their production and the plays that they make in the middle of the field. Sometimes it's just like, oh, again, like you take it for granted that, oh, if someone's in the middle field, they make a play. But the plays they make and the athleticism and the physicality that he played with brought a level of toughness to the defense and security, I guess we would say, in the middle of it. Missing him is tough because linebacker is a instinctual position to where you have to get your reps into play at a fast clip, regardless of how talented you are, right? Like, just imagine how much better, I mean, even Abdul has gotten from freshman, sophomore to junior year, even with moving him around in different positions. But like playing that pure linebacker position is tough to kind of diagnose and feel the different plays when you're just spot doing it. So I think moving forward with these other guys, it's just it's a hard position to fill. But with Kobe, I mean, he played great football, and I think he'll have a successful future. But you have to get guys in there and get their snap counts up to feel comfortable filling that void that he's going to leave.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Looking at guys like Dakari Nelson and Tamir Robinson as guys who got some experience this past season but are going to have to step up and play meaningful snaps in 2025. You know, you have Dom DeLuca back. The aforementioned Tony Rojas's maturation has been really, really solid, but somebody who's going to be able to hold that down from a linebacker spot. Because again, if you're going to try and have that production from that defensive end spot, attempting to get after the quarterback, those sorts of things, you need to have solid linebacker play to support that. That goes without saying. The defensive tackle spot, if that gets lightened up a little bit, that actually might work in Penn State's favor. Again, this 3 down front, if you've got Zane Durant, maybe not necessarily head up on the center as a conventional nose tackle. God knows he's bulked up to about 300 pounds, so he could certainly do that. But you're looking at some other guys to try and rotate in there. Some guys have gone off to the National Football League or left the program, like Josiah Izzard, Devontae Thomas, Hakeem Beamon left the program. Injuries to Alonzo Ford the back end of last season, Caleb Artis as well. So you got some guys that you're hoping are going to bounce in there. But I think that's really going to be the position to watch for Penn State going into 2025. The changes that Knowles is going to introduce with that front, and then also who steps up, who fills the void of the people that have departed, especially Abdul Carter in this respect. In your personal preference, having played the defensive side of the ball, recruited the personnel side of things, do you prefer the 3-man front? Do you prefer a 4-man front, or doesn't really matter to you?
Prefer a 4-man front, just from the dichotomy of players and body types that you can get coming out of high school. I think you get a little limited in the 3-4, and just again, even with the linebackers that you're playing with. I mean, if you can have your pick of the cream of the crop, yeah, 3-4 can be beneficial, but it all comes down to like the actual recruits that you're getting to play that defense.
To that point, as I mentioned before, Knowles, the way college football is now, you hope you have the guy for the entirety of his 3-year contract. Realistically, you probably won't. You might. I don't know. You hope so. How much can you alter your scouting and personnel development style based on, it's like, okay, this is the way this guy likes to run defense? Is Penn State going to continue to do what James Franklin from the top down in the Penn State scouting department has done consistently in terms of evaluating talent, or do you have to already begin tweaking things? It's like, hey, this is going to facilitate our new defensive coordinator's plan in 2025. Does that start now, or is it kind of a slower process?
Well, there's a schematic change. I think you have to look at what you're asking your critical positions to do. And then if there's anything that comes down to like a size critical factor of it, like playing defensive end in a 3-4 or a nose tackle in a 3-4, like that is a bit different. Like When previously you're looking for guys that can run stunts and movement up front with blitzes and things of that nature. So you're looking for guys that are a little bit more agile, still can pack a punch, but can move a little bit, which we kind of ran into some troubles with in the previous years playing Michigan and then running the football, right? So there's just different ways that you approach it. And it's like having that alignment all the way through. I don't think you need to revamp your whole recruiting because Penn State is a tier 1 recruiting school, just like Ohio State was. So from that standpoint, it's just more of maybe tweaking their preferences. But I think Penn State has been successful because they've been sticking to their core values of the players that they bring in to the whole situation.
And to the point I was saying before, this recent news that Myles Garrett, defensive end for the Cleveland Browns, is requesting a trade. Whether or not he gets sent out of Cleveland, we're not sure at the time of this recording, so we'll see what happens. But it just seems like the more that time goes by in the lead up to the NFL draft, that now former Penn State ending line Abdul Carter's value just continues to go up. And it's the weirdest thing about the postseason process, the lead up to the draft, the combine, all these little things, and just guys slowly climb up draft boards. Are you surprised, or it's like, nah, I kind of expected this? Like, even if Garrett hadn't said what he said, there were people who were saying Carter could go number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. He's a rare talent of just size, physicality, athleticism. He plays with a mean streak. You just don't see guys like that too often. We get spoiled at Penn State from just some of the linebackers and things that we see. We're just freak shows, right? From the standpoint of like a Saquon and Micah Parsons in the past 10 years, like seeing those two guys really will mess up your viewpoint and your expectations of what players are supposed to look like. So I say that to say, yeah, Abdul is like a top 5 pick, and he has been since the day he stepped on campus. Like when I remember like a play he made, and I was like, he's a freshman. I was like, oh, God just doesn't make that many people like that, like right. And the other ones play basketball or in NBA. So it's just like when you see that, I'm not surprised at all that he'll go number 1, right? Remember, it was everybody. Hey, I get into my history stuff. Like when Reggie Bush was about to go number 1, and everybody's like, "Oh, what's going on?" And then all of a sudden, it's like, "Hey, who's this Mario Williams?" It's like, "Oh, it's the 6'7", 290-pound guy that runs 4.6." Like we're taking him over this guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So sometimes like that fan casual thing, you don't understand how special some of these specimens. That's why I always say football is a physics game first. Then we can get into everything else. And if you have those outlier traits, yeah, you got to roll with them. And Abdul has those.
To wrap up, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the big game this weekend, the Philadelphia Eagles against Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Penn State's own Saquon Barkley is playing his very first Super Bowl. There's been obviously a ton of media done in the past week. That's just natural with Super Bowl week and the lead up to it. But there's been so much talk about Saquon this year. An MVP caliber season has just been reinvigorated by this move from the New York Giants to the Philadelphia Eagles. What have your personal feelings been like? Because you obviously have a relationship with Saquon. For him to be able to compete in a Super Bowl for the first time, he just seems like the consummate teammate, such a good human being. And on top of that, the way that he's played this year has been otherworldly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see, just to come through some triumph, right? Like he's a number 2 overall pick, has some injuries. See how the Giants dealt with him, and he gets a chance to come back and kind of shove it in their face, all while having that team success as well. Not just him rushing for 2,000 yards and getting out in the first quarter, because everything that people say about running backs, even when they produce, but do they create win shares? It's like, no, Philadelphia Eagles are in the Super Bowl because of Saquon Barkley, largely, right? And it shows that his value is there, and he kind of stayed true to the game and didn't, he got done wrong by New York, came to play. They paid other guys around him, and he really like kept his character throughout the turmoil. And that's something that you always want to see. I mean, I always say, like in college, I always felt like the Penn State staff was spoiled to have a superstar like Saquon. Cause like, I'm like, oh, you don't even know what it's like to really deal with a true superstar. Cause like, that's not really it. Like he's a unique shooting star where he's extreme humility, raises the culture of the room, and he's just a very, just a great guy, which you just don't say too often about, elite talents like that. And he really embodies that, and even through turmoil, which is a really cool thing to see. And for him to possibly get a Super Bowl ring after a 2,000-yard rushing season, bring the value back for running backs, man. Go ahead, Saquon.
You're right. The value for running backs is just completely changed, it feels like, in the last handful of years, which is good. Important part of the game. People forgot that running the football and playing good defense wins football games.
People forget how exciting it is to see a dominant running back.
Yes.
I think that's the part that you're not necessarily get to see. It's like we've gotten to this, oh, is he a scat back? Is he a 3-down back? But between him and Derrick Henry, these guys that are making it exciting to run the football, and it's a cool thing to see.
Best of luck to Saquon Barkley this coming weekend. Thank you all so much for tuning in here on State of State. Get in our comment section. Let us know what you're curious about with this Penn State football team as it stands right now. Winter workouts obviously going on. The spring game is, days, I don't know, weeks away, really. No, it's not days away. It's a long time away. But April, when things thaw in State College. A lot of changes for Penn State football, but a lot of promise going into 2025. So hop in our comment section, get at us on social media, and let us know what you'd like to hear about from us here on State of State. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.